The air was thick with the scent of magnolia and bourbon glaze. Fairy lights shimmered over perfectly trimmed hedges, and the jazz trio near the koi pond played something just classy enough not to be distracting. Franklin in the Fall had a way of wrapping dysfunction in elegance. I knew better than to be impressed. No one greeted me when I arrived. Not Sedona, not my parents, not even Vela, whose name was plastered in gold foil on every menu and napkin ring. I'd parked down the hill, walked up the gravel path alone, heels clicking like accusations across the stones. I should have worn flats, or better yet, stayed home. They were all dressed in soft pastels, rosewater, champagne, sage. I was in black, not funereal, just tailored, clean, controlled. When you've been labeled difficult long enough, you stop apologizing for it. I scanned the tables, looking for my name. I wasn't expecting center stage, just something close, near the family, near the people I'd helped get here. But instead, I found my name, Tallis Bronte, tucked by the edge of the patio, right beside the restroom entrance. The table rocked slightly when I touched it. One of the chairs had a chipped leg. I sat. A woman in a pale blue wrap dress passed by, barely glancing at me. "Can you grab me a water, sweetheart?" I blinked. "Sure." She didn't wait for me to say more. I poured her water. She didn't thank me. This wasn't new. I'd been mistaken for the help at every family event since Sedona started branding herself as the face of community-led beauty. I didn't mind being behind the scenes, but it's one thing to be quiet. It's another to be invisible. Across the garden, Sedona glowed beneath the canopy. Her smile was camera-ready, her arms draped around our mother like a magazine ad for maternal perfection. Ovidia nodded as guests complimented the event's vibe. My father, Thatcher, was near the bar, retelling the same anecdote about his college days to a new set of donors. At my table, the view was a bit more functional. I could hear the whoosh of the restroom door. Occasionally, it creaked. The linen on my table had a faint stain, coffee or maybe red wine from a past event. A man sat down beside me, grinning. "Tallis, right?" I nodded. "We met last summer at that fundraiser Sedona hosted. You were handling the check-in, yeah?" "I coordinated the funding," I said, smiling lightly. "Including the venue." He paused. Right. Great event." No follow-up. He stood up to greet someone else moments later. I was used to it. I kept my hands folded in my lap, posture calm, breath even. These were things you learned with time, how to blend in, how to not take up space. Then, the mic was passed. "Let's take a moment," the MC said brightly, "to hear a few words from the family." Thatcher approached first. He looked freshly powdered. The mic screeched slightly as he adjusted it. "We're so proud of all our daughters," he began, chuckling. "Even the one who's allergic to success." Laughter rippled. I didn't blink. "And of course," my mother added, stepping up beside him, "we have to acknowledge our wild card. How does it feel, being the one who never quite belonged? The useless one?" A pause. Not long, just enough. Some laughed, others looked confused. A few guests smiled uncertainly, unsure if this was a joke or an open wound being picked in public. I smiled. I didn't do it to disarm. I did it because it was the only move left that didn't concede the game. Sedona looked my way. She didn't intervene. She lifted her champagne glass and took a sip like the toast hadn't just sliced through bone. My therapist once said, "Silence is a boundary too." You don't need to clap back, just don't step forward. I didn't. I stared at my untouched plate, the rosemary sprig balanced too carefully on top. My breath stayed calm, even when my hands itched to grip the table's edge. They still thought I needed their praise, that I'd show up just to be shown my place, that I didn't know exactly what I had in my pocket, what I'd been holding on to, quietly, for years. The glass of water before me rippled as a tray was set down nearby. I didn't look up. My phone buzzed underneath the napkin. I slid it out discreetly. Unknown number. The message: "You might want to keep those receipts." I did. I froze. Not in fear, but recognition. That voice. That phrasing. My heart didn't race. It calculated. Whoever it was, they'd just confirmed what I needed to hear. Someone else remembered too. I read the message again beneath the linen napkin. Keep those receipts. I did. The words shouldn't have meant anything, but they did. They stirred something, a memory I hadn't meant to carry into tonight. The envelope, the crooked ink, the kind of detail you'd miss unless you were used to watching the small things break. Earlier that week, the invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope. I almost didn't open it. My name had been scrawled in blocky handwriting, not embossed like the others I saw later on the tables. Sedona's shimmered with gold foil. Mine looked like an afterthought, a name misspelled and corrected in a different pen. Tally's Bronte. I remember sitting on my kitchen stool, staring at it longer than I should have. Not a big deal, I'd whispered to myself, like a reflex. But it was. It always was. At the table, I watched guests sip wine and compliment the floral arrangements. I kept hearing Sedona's name float through the air like a brand tagline. Sedona's vision. Sedona made this feel so magical. I didn't expect them to credit me, just to notice. That's all I'd ever really wanted. To be noticed on purpose. A woman in pearls leaned across her table. "Tallis, right?" she asked, her voice dripping with that too-sweet tone Southern women use when they don't really remember you. "I didn't recognize you without your nonprofit badge. Are you still doing that? What was it? Grant thing?" "Yeah," I said, smiling with a politeness I learned young. "Still making sure people get what they need, quietly as usual." "Oh, that's just so noble," she replied, already turning away. A waiter passed behind me and set down a fresh glass of water. I took it gratefully, more for the distraction than anything else. My eyes wandered to Sedona again. She was laughing at something, head tilted perfectly, her hand on Ovidia's shoulder in that calculated pose she'd mastered by 15. They looked like a painting, mother and daughter, glistening in soft light, completely unbothered by the sister sitting 20 feet away, out of frame. I pulled my phone from my clutch and opened my photos, scrolling back to the envelope again. It still sat in my inbox, slightly smudged, slightly off. I remembered my name being botched at a church spelling bee when I was 10, left off the final school program when I graduated, forgotten on a Christmas tag that year, Mom labeled, "To Talia." Funny how they forget your name long before they forget your worth. Laughter erupted from the next table, pulling me out of my spiral. A guest showed something on their phone to a group. "This just went up. Sedona posted the family photo," another said. I tilted slightly, enough to glimpse the screen. There it was, the group shot taken earlier under the magnolia arch. Everyone glowing, perfect lighting, coordinated colors. Except me, I wasn't in it. I remembered being pulled into that photo reluctantly, standing slightly to the side. Sedona had said, "Tallis, get in here, come on." I had. But now, cropped, cut, erased. The caption read, "So blessed to be surrounded by those who lift me higher." My stomach didn't drop. It settled. Into something cold, grounded. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say a word. I just stared at the screen until the image blurred, then closed my eyes and exhaled. They don't even pretend anymore. I am a ghost in my own history. Another buzz, the same number. This time it wasn't a sentence. It was a file. A PDF. My fingers trembled only slightly as I tapped to download it. The title flickered across the screen. Sedona Blythe. Trademark infringement claim. Draft. I stared at the title on my phone screen. Sedona Blythe. Trademark infringement claim. Draft. The PDF loaded slowly, like it knew the weight it carried. I tapped to open it, pretending to glance around at the floral centerpieces as if I were still part of the background. No one at my table noticed. That was typical. The file was cold, clean, legal formatting, embedded images, time-stamped design drafts, screenshots of our email exchanges, logo proposals with my signature watermark, wire transfer receipts, a spreadsheet labeled Blythe Brand Seed Capital, Origin Sources. I hadn't compiled this, but it was mine. Someone had pulled every scrap of proof I'd tucked away and stitched it into a story. My story, but louder, undeniable, public. For a second, I stopped breathing. Not because I was scared, but because I realized I wasn't alone. Someone out there had been paying attention. Someone knew I wasn't making this up. wasn't just the difficult sister. I wasn't crazy. And I damn sure wasn't invisible. It took me back a year to the night I created the folder. I remember the glow of my laptop at 2 a.m., my kitchen counter stacked with receipts, subject lines in my inbox, wire confirmed, finalized version attached, rent invoice, January. I hadn't labeled the folder something clever. I just named it. Proof. My hands were shaking back then too, though for different reasons. I wasn't planning to use it. I wasn't looking to burn bridges. I just needed to know I could point to something if they pushed me too far. I heard Kayla's voice in my memory, casual and knowing. You always cover your tracks, huh? I had laughed then. When no one believes your word, you kind of have to. Back in the present, my phone buzzed again. Same number, still no name. I set it down, turning my attention to the murmurs around me. Someone nearby praised the calligraphy on the table cards, Sedona's aesthetic. Someone else mentioned the wine pairings, Sedona's touch again. My name didn't surface. Of course it didn't. Earlier that day, I'd tried to give a gift, a simple gesture. A gold locket with Vela's initials on one side and mine on the other. I had it custom made. It wasn't flashy, just intentional. When I handed it to Mom, she held the box delicately, examined it like it might stain her fingertips. Oh, Talis, you really don't have to. It'll just make things complicated, she said, smiling that polite, practiced smile she used in front of people she hoped would fundraise with her later. I didn't answer. Just watched as she placed the box near the dessert table, like it was a centerpiece someone forgot to use. I told myself not to take it personally, but I did, because every time I gave them something real, they made it look out of place. I stood from the table a few minutes later, weaving through a maze of satin dresses and linen napkins. No one stopped me. The restrooms were near the back garden, but instead of heading straight there, I ducked into the powder room near the private hall, locked the door, sat on the small bench next to the sink, and just let the silence settle. I opened my notes app, tapped New Note. The title read, They Forgot. I didn't. I started listing, not for anyone else, just me. 2009, paid off Sedona's community college tuition balance. 2010, rebranded her first blog, Beauty Blessings Birch. 2012 to 2016, covered boutique rent quarterly when sales dipped. 2017, funded trademark filing she never followed through on. 2019, bought the building they now host parties in. By the fifth line, I stopped needing proof. I just wanted the truth to have a place, even if it was only on my phone. When I finally opened the door to leave, the hallway was empty. I moved toward the fountain, letting the sound of water cover the pressure in my chest. That's when I heard it. She didn't tell you I called, did she? I turned. Creighton Ames leaned against the stone ledge like he hadn't just upended my sense of control. Same quiet presence, same haunted eyes. In his hand was a phone. On the screen, a contract. My name, my design, my equity. The one I thought had been lost. The walk back from the fountain wasn't long, but it felt like I was crossing an ocean. Creighton's words still sat heavy in my chest, his voice echoing, subtle and dangerous, like a match waiting to meet dry wood. I kept my posture upright, my hands steady. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me shake, even if it was with clarity, not fear. They erased me so thoroughly, even I stopped keeping score. That thought kept looping in my head like a song you don't realize is about you until the bridge hits. But not anymore. Tonight, there would be no more forgetting, at least not quietly. The MC had returned to the mic, her voice rising with that artificial cheer that only comes from corporate sponsorship or Midwestern politeness. We'd like to take a moment, she said, pausing for effect, to thank the person who made this event possible, but has chosen to remain anonymous. The crowd broke into a soft wave of murmurs and awes, glancing toward the center table. Sedona offered a perfectly humble smile and lowered her eyes just enough to feign modesty. A few guests clapped. One woman behind me whispered, "That's so like her, always giving, never needing credit." I didn't move. I just watched. You could call it jealousy if you needed to name it something. But it wasn't. It was grief, of the type that shows up only when someone else wears your skin and the world applauds. Flashbacks flared behind my eyes without permission. Venmo receipts, logo drafts, calls I took during lunch breaks to help Sedona secure a florist when hers bailed. The week I took PTO to help rebrand the boutique before a relaunch she told the press she did in isolation during a time of creative rebirth. None of it stung as much as hearing someone at a nearby table say, "Sedona's always been the rock." I didn't want credit. I just didn't want the lie. Later, after the lights dimmed a bit and the waiters began serving the second course, Sedona slipped into the seat beside me like a shadow that knew exactly where I'd sit. "Mom told me she sent you that sweet message this morning," she said, sipping her wine. I looked at her, then unlocked my phone and scrolled without a word. I found the message and held it out. Sedona's gaze narrowed as she read. "Thinking of you. I love you. I miss my girl." She didn't say anything at first, then she opened her own phone. After a few taps, she smiled tightly. "Yeah, I guess she sent that to all of us. You know she means well." I met her eyes. "You know that's not the point." The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was empty. There was nothing left to say between us, and we both knew it. I remembered something my therapist had told me during one of those winter sessions I booked on a whim just to stop myself from booking a flight instead. Family who weaponizes love will always call your boundaries betrayal. I opened my email and composed a message to myself. Subject, exit wounds. The body read, "They can't unthank what was never theirs to claim." As I stood to refill my glass, a hush floated nearby. "She doesn't even look like she wants to be here," one man muttered. I turned just enough to catch his face, one of my father's colleagues. The man next to him leaned in. "That's the daughter they always say is difficult. Quiet ones always are." I didn't flinch. I didn't correct them. I let the word difficult hang in the air like a title I'd finally earned. But this time, I wasn't retreating. I was repositioning. I moved toward the far edge of the tent, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't touched in years. It rang once, then again. I stepped out into the cool night, the murmur of clinking glasses and fork taps dulling behind the draped tent. The manicured hedges muffled sound, but I could still hear the fake laughter echoing off the marble walkway. I found the darkest corner of the garden and pressed Kayla's name on my phone. She picked up after the second ring. "Tallis, you got it?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I got it." A pause. "I figured you'd want to know. She's using your logo again. This time, it's on her new Glow Grace Serum line. Website goes live next week. That PDF I sent, that's just a draft. But everything's time-stamped and legally referenced." I closed my eyes, the phone tight against my ear. "She scrubbed my name from it again, didn't she?" Kayla didn't answer right away. Then, "Every trace." "I always knew they'd cross that line," I muttered, half to myself. "I just didn't think they'd drag my name through the dirt to do it." "You want me to do anything else?" she asked. "You don't owe them silence." "No," I said, "but they sure as hell owe me truth." I hung up. My heels crunched against gravel as I turned back toward the tent. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The truth doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to arrive. Inside, the reception had moved on to champagne and photo booths. Guests milled about in sequined dresses and cufflinks they didn't pay for. I found my seat again, unnoticed, just as the MC announced, "Take a moment to admire the gorgeous backdrop for tonight's celebration, an original design, courtesy of Sedona's branding vision." There it was, the boutique logo I created 6 years ago, same script, same flourishes, except now, Sedona's initials were embedded at the base like a watermark. And mine? Gone. Erased. "It's so clever," someone said. "The S loops right into the G, like she knew from the start it'd be big." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I remembered the night Sedona called crying, claiming her designer flaked, that she needed something simple to hold the place until she could hire someone proper. I made that logo in a rush, after work, with a headache, while editing her press release. I stared at it now, plastered in 10-foot vinyl behind the dessert table. They didn't just take the work, they scraped off my fingerprints. A notification buzzed on my phone. Sedona, crisis, we're short on the cake deposit. Can you spot $1-800? I'll Venmo back. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, archived it. They still thought I was a vending machine for their emergencies. Swipe once, problem solved. No receipt necessary. I looked around. The calligraphy on the place cards? Mine. The welcome signs? Mine. The linen color palette? I had chosen it from a catalog Sedona had no time to read. She just smiled and took credit, again. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the recurring transfer labeled Blythe Family Foundation, $500 monthly. It had started as a stopgap after Sedona's second round of unpaid rent. I tapped cancel and confirmed. It wasn't about money. It was about math, and mine no longer added up in their favor. The lights shifted, signaling speeches. I stood, intending to refill my glass. A familiar rustle followed me. Deliberate steps, too soft to be a waiter. I turned slightly. Vela. Her veil had been tucked behind her shoulder, her makeup slightly smudged from dancing or maybe holding back tears. I know it's yours, she said under her breath. The logo, the decor, all of it. I met her eyes. They told me, she continued, voice cracking, that if I mentioned you, it would ruin the night. I exhaled, steady. It was already ruined, I said softly. I'm just removing the mask. The music swelled behind us. The MC tapped the mic again. Let's welcome a few heartfelt words from family. The tent lights dimmed just enough for the MC to step forward again, tapping the microphone with a polished smile. We'd now love to invite any family member who has something to share, a memory, a blessing, a toast. Murmurs spread like spilled champagne across the tables. I saw Sedona start to rise, gracefully, of course, as if choreographed, but before she could stand fully, I pushed my chair back and walked forward. The motion caught more attention than I expected. Silverware paused. Conversations clipped mid-sentence. Sedona's smile froze on her face like a frozen filter, wide but strained. She sank back into her seat without making eye contact. As I walked, I noticed people whispering, some confused, some curious, most uncomfortable. I passed the long table where my name was misspelled, stepped over the same spot I'd stood in earlier when they cropped me out of the photo. I reached the podium, clutch in hand. I didn't need notes. I turned to the tech assistant beside the screen. Would you mind playing this for me? I handed over a small USB drive. He hesitated, then nodded. The projector lit up behind me. First slide. An email confirmation. Me wiring money for the down payment on Sedona's original boutique lease. Next, a logo design, time-stamped. My initials in the corner. Then came the contracts. Signed, notarized, scanned. Payments. Rent coverage. My signature. A collective hush swept across the room. Receipts rolled across the screen like a courtroom montage. Subtle gasps punctuated each frame. Someone near the back said softly, "That's her handwriting." I didn't turn around. I didn't speak over it. I let the truth speak for itself. I didn't do this to shame anyone, I said quietly once the screen faded to black. I did it so no one can say they didn't know. Before anyone could respond, the final slide appeared. A cropped email thread. Subject line. Shut her up. It was from Sedona. Sent to our mother. Talis is so naive. She still thinks she matters to anyone in this family. This one wasn't subtle. This one landed like a knife. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. A few looked toward Sedona, still, pale, eyes wide. Ovidia stared straight ahead, lips thin, arms crossed tightly across her lap. I didn't acknowledge the email. I didn't explain it. That wasn't my job anymore. I looked at the guests, the donors, the former neighbors, the people I'd quietly helped over the years, and I nodded. That was for my own clarity. Thank you for giving me 3 minutes of truth. I stepped down. No one clapped, but no one stopped me. As I returned to my table, I could feel the weight of the shift. Some guests avoided eye contact, Others offered hesitant nods, the kind that say, "I'm sorry," without saying anything at all. My father cleared his throat loudly, but said nothing. Typical. Vela didn't meet my eyes. She stared down at her plate, twisting the corner of her napkin. Sedona, ever the performer, attempted a smile at the guest next to her. He shifted away, murmuring something to his wife. It wasn't applause I wanted, I thought, lowering into my seat. It was the silence that comes after a truth you can't deny. The stem of the champagne glass near my plate caught the overhead light. A folded napkin lay beside it, slightly off-center. I opened it. Meet me by the back kitchen at 8:45. I have something to return. It was signed. Creighton. I checked the time on my watch. 8:38. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't waiting for anyone to give me permission. The hallway behind the kitchen smelled like steam and lemon cleaner. A utility light buzzed faintly overhead as I stepped into the narrow corridor just beyond the back prep line. Creighton stood there, leaning against a wall like he'd never left. His tie was loosened. He held a manila folder and a scratched USB drive. "You should have been the one on that stage," he said without preamble. "I told her that years ago, but she didn't care who paid, only who got seen." He handed me the folder. Inside, contract copies, my designs, voice memo transcripts, emails Sedona had sent him late at night. "I just need something that looks real," one read. Another, "Tallis won't mind. She never makes it about her." I didn't ask why he kept them. He just said, "Because someone had to." I flipped through the pages slowly, my fingers steady. On the inside, something ancient was breaking apart, or maybe it was finally stitching back together. "Did you see the video?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He nodded once. "The clip of you with Vela at the hospital? I edited it in myself. Sedona had it pulled 2 days ago. Said it wasn't on brand." I inhaled through my nose, then exhaled. The memory surfaced sharp and bright. Me showing up after an 8-hour shift, hands full of reheated soup, holding her baby so she could nap for the first time in a week. The rocking chair in that sterile postpartum room. Vela's tiny fingers curling around mine. "They don't erase memories," I said quietly. "They erase proof." Creighton didn't argue. "It wasn't just that," he continued. "There was another clip. Vela was 6. We had her mic'd up for that silly mini-documentary Sedona insisted on for the boutique relaunch. She looked straight into the camera and said, "Dee Tallis is the best. She's better than a fairy godmother." I looked up. "They cut it," he added. "Too long, they said. Would slow the energy." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. "The truth's always too long for people who live on short stories," I said, "and I've spent a lifetime handing them edits." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen staff moved in and out of swinging doors nearby, oblivious. "It was never about what I gave," I murmured. "It was about how little they'd have to acknowledge it." Creighton shifted. "Are you ready to say all this when it counts?" I met his eyes. "Are you?" He nodded. "I already lost her once for telling the truth. I'm not losing myself too." I closed the folder, tucked it into my purse. "Then we start with the documents." We turned to walk back toward the main tent. I was halfway into a sentence about how to frame the timeline when the shadows shifted. Sedona stepped into the light, arms crossed, face unreadable. "So this is your revenge tour?" she said. I didn't blink. "No. This is the first time I stopped letting you write me out." She smirked. "Then you better be ready for the rewrite I've got planned." I pulled out my phone, pressed record, and tucked it quietly into my purse, just in case. Creighton walked 2 steps behind me as we made our way around the tent. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The tension in the air had already pivoted since my last appearance at the mic. Every glance felt different now, less dismissive, more cautious. No one knew what was coming next, but I did. When we reached the main entrance again, the MC looked startled to see me approach. Her voice faltered as she adjusted the mic. We have one last family moment." Perfect. I climbed the few steps slowly, clutching a manila folder in my left hand. My heels no longer felt heavy, they felt grounded. I opened the folder, took a steadying breath, and raised my eyes to the crowd. "I won't take much of your time," I said. "I just wanted to thank you all for celebrating in the home I paid off 4 years ago." A wave of murmurs swept through the tent. Gasps. Some froze with their wine glasses mid-air. Others turned to Sedona, whose smile twitched slightly before vanishing altogether. From the folder, I pulled out the deed and held it up. "My name is the only one on this property's title," I continued, steady. "I refinanced my apartment to help fund this. I wired the money during lunch breaks. Meanwhile, I watched certain people post about closing on the venue themselves." I glanced toward Sedona. Her posture was perfect, but rigid. Her knuckles whitened against the white tablecloth. On the screen behind me, the slideshow resumed. This time, my own curated images, wire confirmations, bank transactions, mortgage disclosures, dates, signatures. My hands, my pen. "It's funny," I said, "how much louder you hear your own name when no one else is saying it." The room had gone from warm to chilled in seconds, but I wasn't finished. "There's more," I added, returning to the mic. "You can also find me listed as majority stakeholder of the Blythe Beauty LLC. And according to the documents filed with the county last Thursday." The screen flickered again. Scanned images of legal filings appeared. "A civil suit is now in motion, citing misappropriation of credit, copyright infringement, and business fraud." Silence. Sedona didn't rise. Her hands dropped to her lap. Ovidia looked like she'd forgotten how to blink. My father stared at the exit. "You always told me family helps family," I said, voice still calm. "But no one said family had to forget itself to keep helping." Ovidia whispered my name. "Tallis." "Not here." I turned to face her fully. "Where then, mother? In another group message you send to all your daughters at once?" Thatcher cleared his throat, but his mouth stayed closed. Vela looked down, shoulders stiff. She didn't cry, but she didn't smile either. She was frozen in a way I remembered from childhood, when you're too young to stand up, but too old to not know what's happening. There was no yelling. No table slamming, no dramatic storm out. Just wait, just silence. This wasn't vengeance, it was accounting. I walked down from the stage slowly, passing tables that no longer made eye contact. One man coughed into his napkin. Another woman studied the dessert menu like it had just appeared for the first time. As I reached Sedona's table, I paused just long enough to place a white envelope beside her untouched champagne glass. She didn't reach for it. Inside was a single post-it note. "Check your inbox. You'll need a lawyer." I didn't look back. No one called my name. No one followed me. Outside, the air had shifted. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Not yet close, but on its way. Behind me, the tent buzzed with the beginning of a storm that had nothing to do with weather. I stepped out of the tent like I was stepping off a stage I never asked to perform on. The air was heavier now, though not because of the weather. No one followed. No one called my name. The only thing behind me was a rising tide of whispers, too hushed to catch, too familiar to care about. When the smoke clears, you find out who was breathing fire and who was only clapping for the warmth. That was something my therapist once said, and tonight I finally understood it. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The gravel beneath my heels crunched in slow rhythm as I reached the car. I pulled the driver door open and sat for a long moment before starting the engine. The interior was still warm from earlier sunlight. The silence settled like a blanket. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Not from Ovidia, not from Sedona, certainly not from my father. I shouldn't have expected them. My fingers hovered over the message history with my mother. That morning, hours before the first insult was lobbed over dinner rolls, she had sent me a message. "Thinking of you. I love you. I miss my girl." It caught me off guard then. Made my chest tighten, made me pause in the bathroom stall before the rehearsal photos. For a moment, I wanted to believe she meant it. Then Sedona dropped her phone during prep. I picked it up to hand back and instinctively glanced at the screen. Same message, same timestamp, same line break. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. Mass-produced affection is worse than silence. At least silence doesn't lie to you. The voice memo I'd recorded from the stage sat in my files. I replayed it now, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to remember how it felt to say the words out loud. I listened as I spoke of equity, of deeds and trademarks and fraud. My voice didn't shake once. There's a loneliness in finally being right. It doesn't cheer. It quiets. I looked up through the windshield, eyes fixed on the hazy glow of the tent's lights. Then I remembered Vela's toast. I want to thank the one who's always been my second mother, Sedona. She had said it without hesitation, voice trembling with performative gratitude. The crowd had nodded, murmured approval. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Because I remembered. I remembered the night Sedona called sobbing, saying she couldn't do this alone. I showed up, sat beside her in the hospital, rocked Vela through the first colicky night. I remembered making lunches, driving her to pediatrician appointments when Sedona was too busy managing the brand. I remembered staying up all night with her fever, whispering stories I made up on the fly. I remembered the small voice, years ago, pressing close to my ear. I wish you were my real mom. Wishes age like photographs, fading in public, vivid in your own drawer. The driver's side mirror caught movement. A shadow crossed slowly toward the car, my hand stilled on the steering wheel. Thatcher. He stopped by the window, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. They won't recover from this, you know, he said. Not accusatory, not sympathetic, just tired. I met his eyes. Good. Maybe now they'll stop trying to bury what they built on. He didn't answer. He just nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the tent, alone. Morning came in shades of gray. The sun hadn't broken through yet, but the weight in my chest already had. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, legs folded beneath the cotton robe, phone in hand. The inbox had grown overnight. Subject lines screamed silently. Urgent. Legal counsel. Media inquiry. Your name is trending. Creighton had been busy. He'd sent me a clean folder with attachments, his signed affidavit, the contract history, even screenshots of past correspondence with Sedona. A timeline, precise, polished, measured, unlike the chaos they'd tried to wrap around me for years. It didn't take long, I murmured to myself. All they needed was someone brave enough to say it first. The regional blog piece dropped at 6:03 a.m. Whistleblower ex-boyfriend reveals boutique's hidden owner. Sedona's smiling face topped the article, juxtaposed with scanned contracts and tax filings bearing my signature. It went viral before my coffee finished brewing. Comments ranged from sympathetic to savage, typical branding theft. She got played by her own family. She should have known better. Kayla called by 6:20. You just broke the algorithm. I laughed quietly, eyes on the ceiling. That's one way to start a Saturday. You okay? No one knew, I said, still calm. Because I let them believe what they needed to. That's over now. As I pulled the curtain back slightly, the city moved beneath me. Quiet, rushing nowhere in particular, just like I needed. Then my voicemail pinged. Vela, her voice cracked through the recording. I just found out. You were supposed to give the speech, the toast. They pulled you the day of. I froze. I didn't know. I swear, Dee, I thought you were too busy. Sedona said it would be easier that way. Mom called it divisive. A month earlier, Vela had asked me, in her tiny handwriting on a coffee-stained note, to speak at her wedding. I said yes. They never told me I was cut. Of course they didn't. They didn't want my words, I whispered. Just my silence. The call ended with a sniffle and, I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I packed. It was time to go home. While folding clothes, I canceled all auto transfers. Then I called my financial advisor and requested a full restructure of holdings. Anything co-linked with the Blythe name? Close it. Lock it. Redirect it. Then I sat at the desk and opened a blank email. Subject line, public clarification, statement of ownership. In the body, I wrote 3 words. I built this. I attached a single scanned contract. One photo of me at the construction site 6 years ago, in jeans and paint-smeared gloves. A caption. I had the keys before they printed the name. I hit save. No rage. No second guessing. Let them tell whatever story they want. I'm keeping the receipts and the titles. As I zipped my bag, a notification popped up. One new comment on your LinkedIn post. I opened it, half expecting more outrage or backhanded sympathy. Instead, it read, "Would love to talk. We're looking for a keynote speaker for our National Women's Leadership Conference. Theme, Reclaiming Voice. Interested?" I sat for a beat, then smiled. For the first time in a long while, my name was exactly where it belonged. At the top, the door to my apartment closed with a soft, familiar click. Same keys, same chipped doorknob, same hardwood floors that creaked in all the old places. But everything felt different. Lighter, not because the space had changed, but because I had. I set my suitcase down by the entry and stood there a moment, staring at the stillness. The clock ticked from the kitchen. The fridge hummed. Outside, Durham moved as usual, buses sighing at corners, a dog barking somewhere, early morning runners tracing the sidewalks like muscle memory. Sometimes the house you walk back into is exactly the same, only you've changed enough to no longer feel trapped inside it. I hung my coat, unpacked slowly, methodically. I didn't rush. The chaos was behind me. The fallout still ongoing, I was sure, but the moment for me to react had passed. Now, I got to decide what to do with the quiet. My phone buzzed with less urgency now. No pings from lawyers or journalists. No forwarded contracts. Just the regular clutter. Newsletters, calendar reminders, a grocery coupon I'd never use. But then came the voicemail. Dee Dee, I knew everything. But I froze. Vela's voice cracked. I stopped moving. They told me it would ruin the night, that the guests would talk, that people wouldn't understand. I should have said something. I'm so sorry. I hit play again. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I needed to hear the tone beneath the words. It was there. Shame, but also truth. A memory surfaced. Vela at 10, sitting on my couch with wide eyes, asking what integrity meant. I'd answered simply, "It means doing the right thing even when no one's watching." I saved the message. I didn't reply. I walked into town that afternoon, coat unbuttoned, scarf loose. The air bit just enough to make my lungs feel sharp in a good way. I stopped in front of the bookstore I used to work at in college, Bell Birch. Still smelled like vanilla-scented dust and old paperbacks. I stepped inside. In the memoir section, I picked up The Body Keeps the Score. Fitting. "Didn't you used to work here?" the girl at the register asked, her voice uncertain. "I did," I said, smiling faintly. "Used to write poems in the margins of clearance paperbacks." She laughed. "People still talk about that." "I still do," I told her. "Only now they come with footnotes and legal exhibits." Before I left, I pulled the contract, from my bag, folded it carefully into a blank journal, slid it between the shelves under Memoir, Women. Not to hide it, to leave a breadcrumb. Let someone else stumble upon it, maybe understand a little more about the price of erasure. Back home, I drafted my keynote proposal for the conference. Title, The Price of Silence and the Freedom in Saying No. From the closing paragraph, I wrote, "Sometimes you don't heal by being welcomed back. You heal by walking forward without waiting." I hit send. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. One new email, from Ovidia. Subject, just, "Thinking of you." I stared at it. No body text, no signature, no apology. I deleted it. Then I emptied the trash. 3 weeks later, I stood behind a podium in Atlanta, blinking under soft spotlights. My name was printed correctly on the program this time. Bold font, centered, no smudges, no silent disclaimers. The room was full. Conference badge lanyards, not cocktail dresses. A different kind of audience. Not one built on shared blood, but on shared truths. I adjusted the mic and exhaled slowly, letting the weight settle before I spoke. "For years," I began, "I let them define me by what I didn't say. Today, I let myself be known by what I finally did. The audience hushed. They weren't here for gossip. They were here for what happened after the silence. I'm not here to talk about revenge, I continued. I'm here to talk about erasure. Boundaries. What it means when the people who raised you rewrite you. A few people nodded. I saw a woman near the back wipe under her eye. I was the invisible daughter, I said. The one who paid quietly, showed up silently, and disappeared conveniently when it made someone else's story easier to tell. I paused. My name was on deeds, contracts, wiring slips, but never on the photos or in the credits. I glanced at the screen behind me, where a quote from Toni Morrison appeared in white on black. The function of freedom is to free someone else. And I've learned, I said, that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop paying for people to forget you. No applause, not yet, just stillness. The kind that means they're not just listening, they're recognizing themselves in the words. After the speech, I stepped into the hallway outside the conference center. A journalist approached, notepad ready. We're doing a follow-up on the lawsuit, she said. Sedona's PR team declined to comment, but her main brand partner just pulled out. I didn't flinch. They told me I was being dramatic, I replied. Turns out, truth is much more expensive than drama. Back home in Durham, I mailed a document to my attorney. Formal renunciation of all co-owned trademarks with Sedona. I signed it under my full name, Tallis R. Bronte, and added a handwritten note. I kept my name. You can keep the mess. Then I pulled out the last shoebox from my closet, the one with every thank you card Ovidia ever sent me, usually with love from all of us, written in her handwriting. I fed them, one by one, into the shredder. The rain outside made the windows hum. I didn't mind it. I just watched the drops collect and race downward like everything I'd held on to for far too long. Later that afternoon, as I sat at my desk finishing a few grant applications, a new email pinged. Subject, feature opportunity. She rebuilt. Message, we'd be honored to include your story in our next issue. Would you be open to sharing your journey? I replied without hesitating. Only if you spell my name right. That's where this all started. I leaned back in my chair, reached for my coffee, and for the first time in years, used the mug with my initials etched into it. Not a gift, not inherited, not borrowed. Mine. I'm no longer trying to be remembered by the ones who chose to forget me.